From a Frankenstein F-35 to the Federal Reserve officer accused of spying for China and the Marine Corps overhauling its entire F-35 game plan. This week's defense and aviation news is packed, and we're going to jump into it here on the Lowdown, your go-to source for the latest happenings in aviation and defense. Today, we're jumping into a whole host of things that have been going on. A little history of the day, talking about NORAD and its first Intercept. Marine One, what's happening there, and of course, we'll break down the latest advancements in some F-22 and F-18 technology. If you like this kind of info and you want it delivered to your inbox each and every week, make sure you subscribe to the Lowdown newsletter and the link down below. It also enters your chance to win these free patches that we're doing a giveaway for. So don't miss out on that. Click the link down below. All right, jumping over to this week's newsletter, a lot going on, and we're kicking it off with a little bit of history of the day. And that is December 5th, 1961, when NORAD executed its first intercept of two Tu-16 Soviet bombers. They were crossing the Bering Sea, approaching U.S. airspace. The U.S. Air Force launched two F-102 Delta Daggers to go out there and intercept these Badger bombers. Now, this is something that's not uncommon, and obviously it only escalated throughout the Cold War, and even today, it seems like in the last few years, it really has escalated. This past year, in fact, the United States Air Force stood up the 18th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. Now, it transitioned the 18th Aggressor Squadron, painted like Russian fighter jets, and transition that squadron to a fighter interceptor squadron purely to go out there and defend the ADIZ, the Air Defense Identification Zone that surrounds every nation. But as we have these intrusions or attempted intrusions into U.S. airspace or Canadian airspace, we have fighters that are sitting alert to go out there and intercept. Of note, this past year, there was a formation of two Tu-95 Russian bombers as well as two H-6 Chinese bombers flying together that brush the United States ADIZ there. So today we got a mix of F-22s, F-16s, F-35s, F-15Cs, Es, and EXs sitting alert or out there protecting the ADIZ. A little bit of your history of the day. Third of the day, looking at the KH-47 hypersonic missile, the first hypersonic weapon used in combat, which was used in Ukraine, entered IOC, initial operating capability in 2017, and has been utilized by Russia multiple times since then. Now, in 2023, Ukrainians utilizing a Patriot missile system successfully intercepted and shot down a KH-47. So the hypersonic missiles, that presents a unique challenge when it comes to taking these missiles out of the air. As technology evolves and changes, this definitely becomes more and more of a problem. But the Patriot missile system has had a successful takedown of this so far. So if you are a newsletter subscriber, you are automatically entered to win one of these patches. I just sent the email to the first 10 who were selected this past week. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you enter to win. And if you refer people, that's just more entries and more chances to win there. All right, over to the flight line. Defense and aviation news happening around the world. So this Sikorsky, the VH-92, that has hit more setbacks and more delays. The VH-3, the Sea King, which has been flying since the 1970s as Marine One, carrying the president and his key staff, that is set to retire this year. Now, it should have already been retired, but it's been kept online longer now. Now they're saying the VH-92, Sikorsky's newest helicopter, which obviously has upgraded defensive, communications, speed, performance, avionics, the whole 9 yards, that's being delayed until 2030. Now this again should have already been on board and replaced it. In the meantime, we're going to have to rely on the VH-60 in the White Hawk, which is an an H-60 variant, a Black Hawk, if you will, to carry the president when we're operating in a Marine One. Now, HMX-1 is the Marine Corps unit that's assigned to presidential airlift. Any Marine asset that the president's flying in becomes Marine One, just like Air Force One. If it's an F-16, it becomes Air Force One. But nonetheless, this one's going to be delayed at least till 2030. The Marine Corps lost one service member and 3 contractors in the Philippines this past week in a King Air crash. So they were conducting intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. This hails much like the MC-12 missions that I did. That was a King Air 350 platform. TBD, obviously, with the investigation, what's going to come of this. You know, when I was doing the King Air, and it was only a short 7 months there, in that time frame, we had 2 King Airs that entered spins. There's a variety of factors why that happened. But you are operating typically when you're in the orbit just above stall speed. So it, to me, is not saying this is what happened. Not crazy to think that potentially this might have entered a spin. It could have been icing, could have been a whole myriad of things. We also lost the King Air MC-12 mission after I had left, and they had actually used vertical speed, feet per minute, to enter a climb, and the input they had was too great for the performance of what the aircraft could deliver, and they ultimately ended up stalling and spinning the aircraft from very high altitude. So thoughts and prayers go out to those family and friends affected by this crash. All right, the F-35 delay update here. So we've talked about on the podcast TR3, technology refresh. TR3 is the latest and greatest technology refresh that's currently happening. Now, last year, it wasn't going well at all for Lockheed, and the Air Force actually paused accepting jets. So you had a parking lot of new F-35s rolling off the assembly line in Fort Worth just sitting because they weren't meeting the requirements and the specs for TR3 or what it was supposed to deliver. Now, the Air Force has since re-accepted those TR3 jets, the deliveries. However, there's a caveat that they're not combat coded, and they won't be ready with a combat tape or meet the level of combat readiness until later this year, so they're projecting. So they can go out there and train and fight, but it's not a full-up jet according to reports that are out there. The plan now is delaying TR3 operational tests until 2026. So this is all kind of happening at once and merging together, trying to get this thing where it needs to be for TR3, because TR3 lays the foundation for Block 4, and that's really where the F-35 becomes beast mode with all the upgraded avionics, weapons capabilities, and a whole host of other centrifusion, things like that. So TR3 needs to happen. It needs to be dialed in to get to the Block 4 level. And now they're saying Block 4, looking at 2029. So, with this, the F-35 catches a lot of flack in the news. Let's remember that the F-16, which we'll talk about here in a minute, has been flying around since the 1970s. It's gone through multiple upgrades, and now we're on the Block 70, Block 72. So I think these are some growing pains as you go through any process. And I'm not saying our procurement process is great, because clearly we got a few issues to work through, but I am a F-35 believer, despite what everyone says. Interesting facts for Lockheed. In 2024, they delivered 110 F-35s. In 2025, the plan is to deliver between 170 and 190 F-35s. So just think about that. You have an F-35 rolling off the assembly line every 2 days, or even less than 2 days, depending on how it rolls out. They did announce a $1.9 billion loss, and that was on 2 top secret U.S. Air Force projects. They didn't disclose what that was. So Lockheed, again, working through some things. All right, the United States Air Force has restored 2 F-35s. And when I say restored, they took 2 and made 1. So back in 2014, an F-35 operating out of Eglin Air Force Base in Florida suffered an engine fire. Fast forward to 2020, operating out of Hill Air Force Base, an F-35 had a nose gear issue and landed without a nose gear. So what did the Air Force do? Well, they took these 2 jets and they put them together. Cost about $6 million, which is a fraction of the $80 million price tag for an F-35. But a lot of learning went into this to make this happen. Engineering, maintenance, etc. The lessons learned taken out of this would undoubtedly pay dividends down the road should the F-35 ever have to go to combat, suffer battle damage, etc. So they made the Frankenjet. Now over to the Navy, the Helos. I'm sure the Navy pronounces it some different way, but they have tested or released a picture, undated, from the USS Preble, which is a high-energy laser with an integrated optical dazzler and surveillance. I forgot there's surveillance, the Helos. So this is a shipboard laser developed by Lockheed Martin. I've seen different numbers between 60 and 120 kilowatts to over 300. I don't know, but it is a big freaking laser beam that's coming out of this thing in the photo. Really, the takeaway here is, obviously, this is highlighting the fact that directed energy weapons are going to be a thing, and they're going to be integrated into combat. Now, something like this, if it's able to take down cheap drones, etc., that's a huge, robust capability versus having to sling $1 million missiles, as well as if it's just directed energy, like it just opens up a whole new can of worms when it comes to warfare. All right, the Navy has declared IOC, initial operating capability, for its Super Hornet ENF for the Block 2 IRST system. So infrared search and track. This is something that the U.S. military has not really put a lot of energy into its fighters. And by a lot of energy, I mean none whatsoever until recently. We've always relied upon radars and other systems to go out there. But you would find this traditionally in Soviet and Russian fighters, as other nations, being able to detect other planes out there in the sky off their IR energy, the heat energy coming off their planes. This allows for passive detection. So we're talking stealth. That is a benefit, not having to shoot out electrons, as well as being able to detect stealth aircraft because they still put out a heat signature. Now, this first happened with F-15C back in 2021 when they had their first successful missile launch queued off the IRST pod it's utilizing. And last week, it was announced that Lockheed secured a contract to upgrade the F-22 with TAC-IRST, Tactical Infrared Search and Track, which integrates sensor fusion, which is awesome. All right, this is an interesting one. A United pilot has sued United, I guess ex-United pilot. And so if you remember in 2013, they had a 767 have a hard landing at Houston, and it crumpled, and by crumpled, wrinkled the fuselage there due to a hard landing. So in this, the NTSB cited improper flight control inputs from the first officer, and this is the pilot who is suing, and the flight crew's failure to recognize the speed brakes were not armed. So following the pilot's termination, he filed a lawsuit against United in December 24, alleging the airline falsely reported him as the pilot in command to the FAA, which he claims hindered his ability to secure subsequent employment. So when I saw this, I didn't really know why he was suing United, but it sounds like he's saying the PIC, the pilot in command part, which if you're not used to the airlines, you have two pilots, sometimes four pilots on a long haul flight. There's only one PIC, and that's the pilot in command, and that's the captain. The captain has the ultimate authority. It'd be interesting to learn more about this because ultimately, like, he's the one that broke the plane here, regardless if he's the pilot in command or not. It wasn't like now maybe because maybe he was on a line check and it was instruction. I don't know. There's some gray area here, but not what you want. Also, 7.6 bros chime in. I don't know how not arming the speed brakes would result in a hard landing, but maybe there's something there. You arm the speed brakes in the 777, right? But those are going to deploy once you touch down. So I don't know. Be curious to know your thoughts. Throw them down the bottom there in the comments. All right, the Air Force has tested the Viper Shield program. And this is on the Block 70. So are out at Edwards Air Force Base getting tested with the new Viper Shield electronic warfare system. This is developed by L3 Harris, which enhances the survivability and keeps the Viper in the modern fight in contested environments, integrating all the sensors, sensor fusion, all these things that normally are done by the pilot. Now these systems are talking amongst one another. So that happened last week, as well as the first Bulgarian F-16s rolled off the assembly line in Greenville, Spartanburg, there at Lockheed Martin for their Block 70s. We have a former Federal Reserve advisor arrested for alleged espionage. Now, John Harold Rogers has been accused of giving China trade secrets for economic espionage. Prosecutors allege that between 2010 and 2021, Rogers shared confidential Federal Reserve information with individuals linked to China's intelligence services. He received approximately $450,000 in return, and this was for him to teach at a university in Shanghai following his retirement from the Federal Reserve. The indictment claims he transferred sensitive data to his personal email and met with Chinese contacts under the guise of academic activities. Rogers denies these allegations, but obviously with China holding so much U.S. debt, with inside information such as interest rates, it could really allow China to do some economic harm to the United States. So if that's true, I think he's facing upwards of 15 years in prison. Again, he denies the allegations. The United States has deployed F-16s to Greenland. This is in response to a lot of Russian bomber and fighter activity near the Arctic. According to the North American Aerospace Defense Command, Canadian and American aircraft monitor Russian aerospace forces, bombers operating in the international airspace near the region. Subsequently, F-16s were dispatched from Alaska to Greenland as part of NORAD's strategic response. The United States is conducting intelligence flights along the southern border. This has intensified over the last few weeks and has been joined by Air Force RC-135s, Navy P-8 Poseidon aircraft operating to enhance situational awareness, support border security efforts, and the like. The RC-135 is a signals intelligence aircraft and conducted missions near Baja, Mexico, while the P-8 captured imagery along the border from various locations, including Florida, California, and Arizona. All right, the Marines have shaken things up with their F-35 procurement strategy. They now have decided to change it up from a lot of B models to less B models and more C models. So they're going from an initial buy of 353 F-35Bs to 280, and they're going to increase their F-35C model purchase from 67 to 140. In the end, their total strength is still going to remain at 420 F-35s, but this more closely aligns with carrier-based operations and evolving and emerging threats. All right, the Russian Navy has lit up the reactors for a Kirov-Class battlecruiser, the Admiral Nakhimov, marking a significant step towards its return to operational status after a lot of modernization. This is one of the world's largest surface combatants and has undergone upgrades to its weapon systems, sensors, and propulsions. All right, that wraps up the Lowdown newsletter for this week. If you enjoyed it, make sure you grab the newsletter link down below. You get it each and every week absolutely free. Until next time, we'll see you.